This video will obviously be on literature and the SAT. Literature as in the SAT subject test, except I will not go over everything for that test because it would be deemed impossible to do in these 15 minutes that I have. So I cannot do that, but I will go over the regular SAT critical reading section as well in general. So you don't always have to be the best reader to do well in the critical reading section and the literature sections either for the subject test. It just takes a little skill. For critical reading, the only thing that you really need to know is that it's actually an open book test. The only issues that they can present you are with words that you don't know, which is important for the SAT that you somehow memorize and somehow remember a variety of vocabulary words. For those who already are not vocabulary savvy, then they must study a little more. But those who read a lot and those who have read classical works understand a lot of vocab. Also, those who have played various games that install vocab words inside of your mind. As in, I used to play World of Warcraft, and it used to install certain words in my mind. Now we basically go through that. The English section on the SAT starts with the vocab. Personally, the vocab is not bad. It's about like 8 questions of real vocab, and they increase in order of difficulty. So the easy ones you'll expect in the beginning, but the hard ones, if you go to a hard one and you claim it's an easy word, it's probably a trap by the creators. So what you want to do is make sure you know the big words. Make sure you know those words. The basic words you can handle without even knowing a definition, but you have to know the definition of a big word. And not only that, you have to know which words are positive, negative, and sometimes neutral. The positive words, as you know, are happy words. The negative words connotate something to do with negative. It's like if saying someone has a good work ethic, that's positive. Someone's lazy, it's usually negative, that sort of thing, and take that into account. And the continuous clues that are presented, you get your but, you get your although, you get all of that. And but usually means that one is this, but then it's that, as in one's positive then it's negative, or negative then positive. So the but ones are usually easier than normal. I won't really be writing on the screen right now, and I do apologize for this yellow color. That's rather disgusting. But also, for the critical reading section, they often ask for certain passages that you read, and they have little blurbs, but like before you read the passage, read the blurb italicized before the passage so you get your understanding and main idea before you read. You don't have to read the entire passage of a short passage generally, or even a long passage, but you can actually read a short passage if you think you have the time. And it's always general to the understanding. And what people don't understand is that when you're reading for an SAT, you're reading actively, not passively. Passively is when I pick up a book, start reading it. I don't really have a care to say, oh my gosh, this is an allusion, this is alliteration, this is simile, this is euphemism, this is whatever you can name. Usually on the SAT they won't ask you for the names. I mean, on the regular SAT they won't ask you for the names of it, but you're going to be reading actively. You're going to be looking for evidence of a certain mood or tone, and I often had trouble with mood and tone in the beginning, but mood and tone is very straightforward. You just know your basic words like author's purpose, and the purpose could be didactic. He'd be trying to teach a moral. Maybe it's equivocal, maybe it's whimsical. All these words are important. Basically, for that though, you can capture the mood and tone by evidence written. Um, Underline keywords that try to show you a certain persuasion towards a certain area. It's like when I read Common Sense by Thomas Paine. He was constantly stating some sort against Britain or something of the sort, and that was evidence towards he's trying to get people to go against Britain and try to persuade people. So that's basically what they're going to be doing. And then you have your vocab words in the context, and don't just don't think that you can answer the vocab word without going to back to the context where it's found. Because if you're gonna do that, then you're gonna mess up because the vocab word is gonna be different. They made it so that you have to go back and read to that word, and usually 5 lines before and 5 lines ahead is usually a general safe spot and sweet spot for doing something like that. The questions usually go in order, or if they don't go in order, you can find the order very easy um, throughout the passage. And the passage is basically straightforward, unless you get one that's a really classical passage, then that would be more difficult that you have to think about before you can really do it. Basically, then also in regards to the context vocab, you go back to it, you find it, basically try to think in your mind, what is this truly saying to me? How can I put this in my own terms? And that's basically what you're doing through the critical reading section. You're putting it in your own terms in your mind. That they ask the tone, they ask, what is this? Well, what would you think? Like, what's your emotion from it? How do you feel about it? And that's basically it. You don't have to have a passion to sort of feel the emotion. The emotion is there when you read actively. The problem is always reading passively during an SAT test. It's you have to read actively, and many people are not used to reading actively. But when you're expected to be asked questions on a work of literature or a work in general, then you tend to do it actively. You tend to want to search for it instead of try to wait for it or whatever you're doing and try to go through a short passage just for fun. No. Um, Usually that's general questions for the critical reading section now. But for the SAT2 literature, we have a little bit more specific because it's a subject test. The subject test is approximately 1 hour. Um, its basis is literature in general. You get your poetry, your prose, your dramas, anything you can name. It's basically the critical reading section, but for lack of a better term, on steroids. Um, and I think the SAT subject test is better to research before you do the critical reading. It will help you find tone and such better because if you're going from a higher level, then you can go back to that critical reading level that, oh, I know this already. I don't have to do much for it. And another misconception is you often don't have to be in such an AP English class to understand the English on the SAT. English on the SAT is very straightforward. It's some of it's not naturally known because some people are more inclined to other things. As I say, um, some decencies are parceled out unequally at birth, from Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, um, and basically the people that naturally read more and are more into reading classical things tend to understand more modern as well, and as well as classical. So if you read Shakespeare and you try to understand it, you're reading actively, you're trying to understand the tone of what is he saying, what is his meaning. Because in critical reading and in literature, you get allegorical meanings, you get metaphorical meanings, you get meanings that are not literal. But the basis is literal. The basis is if I presented a poem, said something about a fly in my cup, and I was saying something about the fly in the cup. Well, and then I state something about a short life. Short life is the hint, and then it asks the question of what am I saying? The answer is the relative shortness of life. It's not all about the fly. There's no real literal meaning there. In the critical reading section, there might be a little bit of a literal meaning, but to try to divulge you into reading into it a little bit more, and then take your time, and then you're trapped, and the whole mess. But you also have long passages, as I wanted to tell you on the critical reading section. Long passages aren't as bad as they seem. You basically skim for information, as you do on the short passages. They're basically the same strategies. The only real difficult challenge is when you get two passages comparing authors' tone and type of styles. And that's you really have to understand what each is saying, and it's simply that. You have to find evidence in the passage of what they're saying. It's how it's. I make it sound easier than it really is. But when you find out and you read actively on a normal basis, you will eventually get it and understand that, oh, this is evidence for this is evidence for this, and then you'll have more confidence in yourself that you can tell what other thing is going on. And not only can it be applied to literature and the SAT, you can apply it to movies, you apply it to whatever. Symbolisms are everywhere, and such are everywhere. People use literary terms without even knowing it. Um, you can describe someone using a literary term. My favorite is the femme fatale, spelled like it's a French word. It's a literary term. Femme fatale. And that's basically a woman who's the archetype of someone who's controlling. A woman sort of one whom you would not date or wish to date, hopefully. A materialistic woman. Um, Although materialism doesn't define it, because Daisy Buchanan of The Great Gatsby is defined as material, but she's not exactly a femme fatale. She's less extreme in that case, which brings me to another point. In the SAT critical reading section, there are words that will be extreme to a certain place, and those you should always be careful of, because sometimes the author's not saying something extreme. Sometimes they're a little bit neutral on the topic, and they just want to write about it. Their purpose is to write about it. But also for the I wanted to say for the literature SAT 2, you might want to get Barron's or some sort of guide for you, just to understand it before you really take it, because if you go in on a whim, it's going to be very difficult for you. Um, the SAT critical reading section, at certain points you can do it on a whim because you're not expected to already have read these things, so you just read it when you do it and answer questions. It's up to you if you go to questions first, up to you. Um, that's really it for that section. Just know your like vocab. And For the critical reading, you just have to understand tone and like different meanings, what they're saying, something in context, knowing to go back to certain lines, what they refer to. You might want to highlight and underline while you take the critical reading part as well. It's often the most one that consumes your energy because you're reading over and over and over. Um, it's one of the harder sections as well. I find harder than the grammatical sections, which I'll discuss at a later time. Grammatical sections are not as bad as people think. But that's basically it for those two tests within my time frame. If you have any questions, just ask. I'll be more than willing to explain and elaborate.